The council chamber of Capital Sphere was designed by architects who clearly believed silence could be engineered. Every wall shimmered with translucent alloy panels that softened sound, turning the voices of diplomats into distant echoes rather than conversation. The vast circular table floated a few centimeters above the floor, its surface alive with slow-moving holographic projections of star systems, trade routes, and policy documents that no one seemed eager to agree upon. Advisor Tyler Grant had been sitting there for 3 hours. He knew this not because anyone had announced it, but because the small implant in his wrist politely informed him every 30 minutes that his patience reserves were reaching historic lows. Across the chamber, a tall insectoid delegate from the Nerethi Collective was still explaining why asteroid mining tariffs should be increased by precisely 4%. 4%. Tyler resisted the powerful urge to stand up and throw himself out of the nearest observation window. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair and tried to focus on something other than the endless debate. Capital Sphere itself was a marvel, an artificial administrative world orbiting a blue star, built entirely for diplomacy. It contained embassies, council halls, archives, and enough bureaucrats to populate a medium-sized moon. Tyler often suspected the planet existed solely to prove that meetings could survive longer than stars. Beside him sat Queen Nessa of the Elyrian Empire. Tyler kept his posture respectful, though after several hours, even his professional composure had begun to crack. Nessa was known across the Alliance as one of the most formidable rulers in the network. The Illyrians had guided entire star systems through centuries of technological and cultural expansion. Their queen was considered both a strategist and a symbol of stability. At first glance, she looked almost human. Her skin held a faint silver tone under the chamber lights, and her dark hair was braided into elegant loops that rested across the back of her ceremonial armor. Only her ears revealed her alien nature, long, graceful, and slightly angled upward, extending from the sides of her head with delicate precision. Tyler had been warned about Illyrian etiquette. Never speak before being acknowledged. Never interrupt royal deliberation. And most importantly, never forget that Illyrian rulers existed within layers of ceremonial protocol so complex that entire diplomatic manuals had been written just to avoid embarrassing misunderstandings. So Tyler sat still. Very still. Another delegate began speaking. This one was a reptilian economist whose voice sounded like two pieces of sandpaper arguing with each other. Tyler glanced discreetly at his datapad. The projected agenda still listed 11 unresolved topics. 11. He briefly wondered if the council chamber had emergency rations hidden under the table. Beside him, Queen Nessa remained perfectly composed. Her posture had not shifted once during the entire session. She listened with calm attentiveness, occasionally making small notes on a floating console. Tyler admired the discipline. He also suspected she had secretly evolved beyond the need for sleep. A quiet sigh escaped him before he could stop it. He shifted slightly in his chair and reached for his datapad again, intending to check the next voting sequence. In doing so, his hand moved sideways across the polished edge of the table. It brushed something warm, soft. Tyler froze instantly. His brain required half a second to understand what had happened. His hand had just touched the Queen's. Not a formal greeting, not a ceremonial gesture. He had simply bumped into it. For a brief moment, he considered the possibility that if he remained perfectly still, the universe might reverse time out of embarrassment. Instead, the opposite happened. Queen Nessa's fingers closed around his hand. Firmly. Tyler stared straight ahead at the holographic projection of a shipping corridor, as if it had suddenly become the most fascinating object in the galaxy. Surely she would release it in a moment. 1 second passed, then 2, then 5. The Queen did not let go. Tyler felt his heartbeat accelerating in a way that had nothing to do with diplomacy. He leaned slightly toward her, keeping his voice low enough that the surrounding delegates would not hear. "Your Majesty," he whispered carefully, "I believe I may have accidentally stolen your hand." For a moment she said nothing. Then, without turning her head, Queen Nessa replied quietly, "You may keep it for the moment, Advisor Grant." Tyler blinked. That had not been the response he expected. He cleared his throat softly. "I appreciate the generous loan, But I should warn you that human advisors are not officially licensed to hold royal property. The faintest curve appeared at the corner of her mouth. Across the chamber, the insectoid delegate continued explaining tariffs with unwavering enthusiasm. Beneath the council table, however, the Queen's grip tightened slightly. Not painfully, not aggressively, but with a firmness that carried something unexpected. Relief. Tyler slowly realized that her hand was trembling, just barely, and for the first time since the meeting began, he forgot entirely about the council debate. Something much stranger was happening beside him. Tyler kept his eyes fixed on the holographic map hovering above the council table, even though he had absolutely no idea what it was currently displaying. Something about orbital cargo lanes and taxation sectors was slowly drifting across the projection, but his brain had quietly abandoned all responsibility for understanding it, because the Queen of the Elyrian Empire was still holding his hand. He tested the situation cautiously by moving one finger. Her grip immediately tightened, not aggressively, more like someone afraid a door might close if they loosened their grip on the handle. Tyler swallowed. Across the chamber, the reptilian economist had now transitioned from tariffs to something about interstellar freight permits. The speech had clearly been going on for several geological eras. Tyler leaned slightly toward the Queen again, speaking softly without turning his head. Your Majesty, if this is a diplomatic maneuver, I feel obligated to warn you that humans are very bad at remaining calm during mysterious, hand-related situations. Nessa's voice came quietly, smooth and composed. You are remaining calm. That is because I am deeply confused, Tyler replied. For a moment there was silence. Then very faintly, he felt something strange. Her thumb moved slightly across the back of his hand. It wasn't a royal gesture. It wasn't ceremonial. It was curious, like someone testing whether something was real. Tyler stared ahead, trying to process the situation. The Elyrian Queen was famous for her composure. Entire planetary alliances had shifted because of her decisions. Military commanders had once said she could command fleets without raising her voice. And right now she was quietly examining his hand like it was a rare artifact. The insectoid delegate finally stopped talking. Another council member immediately activated their microphone. Tyler's implant vibrated gently inside his wrist. 4 hours remaining on agenda. He considered screaming. Instead, he whispered again, I would like to file a formal request for clarification. Nessa's tone remained calm. Clarification regarding what, Advisor Grant? This, Tyler murmured, slightly lifting their joined hands beneath the table. I am trying to determine if I should be flattered, terrified, or preparing for exile. The corner of her mouth lifted again. Those are dramatic options. I work in politics, Tyler said quietly. Drama is our primary export. For the first time, she turned her head slightly toward him. Her silver eyes met his for a brief moment. There was no anger in them, no royal authority, only something tired and strangely peaceful. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Do humans always react to unexpected events with humor? Only when panic would be impolite. That earned a small breath that might have been laughter. Tyler relaxed slightly in his seat. If she had not ordered his immediate arrest by now, he was probably safe. Probably. Across the chamber, a massive crystalline diplomat from the Yrian Consortium was now projecting graphs into the air. The charts expanded across the room like glowing constellations. Tyler watched them carefully, not because he cared about mineral tariffs, but because looking anywhere else might make the situation more awkward. Beside him, Nessa spoke again. Advisor Grant. Yes, Your Majesty. How long have you served on Capital Sphere? 2 years, Tyler said, although emotionally it feels closer to 12. I see. Her fingers shifted slightly around his hand again, still not letting go. Humans touch each other frequently, do they not? She asked. Tyler blinked. Yes, he said slowly. Quite a bit. For greeting? Yes. For comfort? Yes. For reassurance? Yes. She was quiet for several seconds. The council chamber hummed softly with overlapping voices and holographic projections. Then she said something so quietly, Tyler almost didn't hear it. That must be very nice. Tyler's joking instincts paused for the first time that day. He turned his head slightly toward her. Her posture was still perfectly royal, still composed, still elegant beneath the quiet glow of the chamber lights. But he noticed something now that he hadn't seen before. She wasn't gripping his hand like someone making a point. She was holding it like someone who had been alone for a very long time. Tyler cleared his throat softly. "Well," he said after a moment, "humans do have one unofficial diplomatic principle." "Oh?" "If someone clearly needs a hand," Tyler said lightly, "it would be rude not to provide one." The faint smile returned. Across the chamber, the crystalline diplomat continued speaking about mining corridors. Beside him, the Queen's fingers loosened slightly, not releasing him, just relaxing. And for the first time since the accidental contact happened, Tyler noticed something unexpected. Her hand had stopped trembling. The council chamber lights shifted subtly as the artificial sun cycle of Capital Sphere adjusted for the next administrative period. The transition was so smooth most delegates didn't notice, but Tyler did. He had learned that on this planet the lighting changed before people realized how much time had actually passed, which was unfortunate because it confirmed something deeply troubling. They had been sitting here a very long time, and Queen Nessa was still holding his hand. Tyler had now entered the phase of the situation where the absurdity had become oddly normal. The first 10 minutes had been panic. The next 30 had been confusion. Now his brain had quietly filed the event under unexpected diplomatic activity. Across the council table, the crystalline representative from the Yrian consortium was still projecting economic simulations into the air. Entire asteroid belts rotated slowly in glowing, holographic space, while trade routes blinked like tiny constellations. Tyler pretended to study the projections. In reality, he was trying to determine whether it would be socially acceptable to request a snack break. Beside him, Nessa sat perfectly composed. Her posture was regal, her attention focused on the debate, and her free hand occasionally moved across the floating console in front of her. The other hand remained wrapped around Tyler's. After nearly an hour of this arrangement, Tyler finally whispered again, "Your Majesty." "Yes, Advisor Grant." "I would like to report that my arm is beginning to suspect it has been permanently reassigned to royal service." Her voice carried a quiet trace of amusement. "You may submit a complaint to the council after the meeting." "I would," Tyler murmured, "but the council appears to be immortal." That earned another almost laugh. The faintest vibration moved through her shoulders. Tyler was beginning to suspect that Elyrian queens did laugh. They simply did it quietly enough to avoid alarming the galaxy. A new speaker activated their microphone. This one was a tall, amphibious diplomat whose species communicated partially through color patterns along their neck. As the delegate began discussing hyperspace navigation tolls, the glowing patterns shifted into a complicated series of blues and greens. Tyler stared at it for a moment. "I think he's explaining economics," Tyler whispered. "How can you tell?" Nessa asked softly. The colors stopped flashing when he mentioned taxes. Nessa's grip tightened slightly again as another breath of laughter escaped her. For several minutes they listened to the debate in silence. Then Nessa spoke again, her voice quieter now. "When Illyrians ascend to the throne, physical contact becomes restricted." Tyler glanced sideways. "Restricted how?" "Ceremonial greetings only," she said. "Formal gestures, ritual acknowledgments. Every interaction is observed, recorded, or interpreted." "That sounds exhausting." "It is considered necessary." Tyler tilted his head slightly. "So when was the last time someone held your hand without asking permission from 6 advisors and a legal committee?" There was a pause. "A long time," she said. Tyler didn't press further. Instead, he shifted his fingers slightly, adjusting their grip so it would be more comfortable for both of them. The movement was small and careful, like adjusting the position of something fragile. Nessa noticed immediately. Her eyes flickered toward him. "You are adapting." "Humans are excellent at awkward situations," Tyler said quietly. "We usually survive them with snacks and sarcasm." Across the chamber, the amphibious diplomat finished speaking. Another council member immediately activated their console. Tyler's wrist implant vibrated again. "Agenda item 6 of 17. He inhaled slowly, then leaned slightly toward Nessa. "I have a question." "Yes?" "If this meeting lasts much longer, would it be inappropriate for me to request medical assistance?" For what condition? Severe boredom with potential psychological damage. Her shoulders trembled again. You exaggerate. I am a professional exaggerator, Tyler said. It helps diplomacy. The queen turned her head slightly toward him again. Her long Elyrian ears caught the soft light from the chamber ceiling, casting elegant shadows along her neck. There was something calmer about her now. Earlier her hand had felt tense. Now it rested naturally in his. Advisor Grant, she said quietly. Yes, Your Majesty? You did not pull away. Tyler looked forward again. I considered it. And I decided it would be rude. Another pause followed. Then she said something so softly it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the council chamber. Thank you. Tyler didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched the holographic star systems slowly rotating above the council table. Entire civilizations mapped in glowing light. Trade routes stretching across the galaxy. All of it organized, negotiated, and debated by the people sitting in this room. And yet somehow the most meaningful diplomatic moment in happening that day was hidden beneath the table where no one could see it. After a moment, Tyler cleared his throat. Well, he said quietly, if anyone asks, we'll tell them this was a complex interspecies cooperation exercise. Nessa raised an eyebrow. Oh. Yes, Tyler said. Humans specialize in advanced emotional support technologies. Her faint smile returned. Your technology seems surprisingly simple. That's the secret, Tyler replied. Then he added softly, sometimes the simple things are the rarest. The debate about hyperspace toll corridors had now evolved into a complicated argument involving 3 trade alliances, 2 navigation guilds, and 1 extremely offended asteroid mining consortium. Holographic charts floated above the council table like glowing storm clouds of statistics. Tyler watched them carefully, mostly because it gave him something to stare at while his hand remained firmly occupied. At this point, he had accepted the situation the same way a person eventually accepts gravity. It simply existed. Beside him, Queen Nessa continued listening to the debate with perfect royal composure. Her expression remained calm, her posture elegant, and her voice occasionally entered the discussion with precise, measured comments that instantly quieted the room. Tyler was beginning to realize something remarkable. No one had noticed their hands, or if they had noticed, they had chosen the extremely wise strategy of pretending they had not. A tall delegate from the Orion Logistics Union activated his console and projected a massive rotating model of a cargo station into the air. Transit delays are increasing by 9%, the man announced. If the council does not approve the new hyperspace beacon network, Tyler leaned slightly toward Nessa. I don't want to alarm anyone, he whispered, but I believe we are now discussing the economic future of the galaxy. Nessa kept her eyes on the projection. That is correct. Good, Tyler said quietly, because I stopped understanding the conversation about 40 minutes ago. Her fingers shifted slightly around his again. Your honesty is refreshing. Humans believe honesty is the best policy, Tyler said. Is it? No, he admitted, but it's very entertaining. The faint smile returned to her face. Across the chamber, the holographic cargo station rotated slowly, its docking rings glowing with simulated traffic patterns. Tyler studied it for a moment. Then he whispered again. Your Majesty, I have another concern. What is it? My hand may eventually become famous. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Famous? Yes, Tyler said gravely. If anyone discovers that I accidentally initiated physical contact with the Elyrian Queen during a council meeting, historians will never forgive me. Why? Because I didn't prepare a speech first. This time Nessa actually turned her head slightly, clearly fighting a laugh. Advisor Grant, she said quietly, you worry too much. I work in diplomacy, Tyler replied. Worrying is part of the job description. Another speaker joined the debate. A tall metallic figure from the Elyrian system stepped forward. His species had replaced most of their biological components with cybernetic structures centuries ago, and the soft hum of his internal processors filled the air as he spoke. Efficiency models indicate that the beacon network would reduce cargo drift by 12.3%. Tyler nodded thoughtfully, then leaned toward Nessa again. I'm impressed. By the analysis? No, Tyler said. By the fact that he can calculate 12 decimal places while standing in a meeting. You cannot. I struggle to calculate how long lunch should be. Her shoulders moved again with quiet laughter. The conversation around the table continued. Trade routes appeared and vanished in glowing layers of light. Entire economic forecasts unfolded across the chamber like living star maps. But beneath the table, something far simpler continued. After several minutes of silence, Nessa spoke again. Advisor Grant. Yes, Your Majesty. You adjusted your grip earlier. Tyler glanced sideways. Yes. Why? He shrugged slightly. I thought your hand looked uncomfortable. Nessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said something thoughtful. Most people do not consider the comfort of a queen. That seems inefficient, Tyler replied. How so? If someone is uncomfortable, and he said, they tend to make worse decisions. And you believe that applies to monarchs? Especially monarchs. She studied him for a moment. Then her fingers moved again, subtly shifting so that their hands rested more naturally together. Your logic is unusual, she said. I've been told that before. Across the chamber, the cybernetic delegate finished his presentation. The council moderator activated a floating timer. Agenda Item 7. Tyler leaned back slightly in his chair. Only 10 more topics, he whispered. Nessa glanced at him. You counted? I have a survival instinct. Another brief silence passed. Then she spoke again, her voice softer than before. When this meeting ends... Tyler looked toward her. Yes? You may retrieve your hand. He smiled slightly. I appreciate the permission. She hesitated, then added quietly, but you do not need to hurry. Tyler looked forward again at the drifting holographic stars above the council table. That's good, he said softly, because I wasn't planning to. By the time the council reached the 8th agenda item, Tyler had come to an unsettling realization. The meeting was not slowing down. In fact, it appeared to be gaining momentum. A new projection filled the chamber, this one displaying a complicated network of hyperspace beacon routes stretching across half the known galaxy. Dozens of glowing lines intersected like luminous threads in a cosmic web. Tyler stared at the projection with the determined focus of someone who absolutely did not understand what he was looking at. Beside him, Queen Nessa remained composed, calm, and very much still holding his hand. At this point, Tyler's brain had accepted the situation so thoroughly that the only real surprise would have been if she suddenly let go. The council moderator spoke again. Delegates, we will now address the dispute regarding the outer belt navigation beacons. A large holographic asteroid belt appeared in the air. Tyler leaned slightly toward Nessa. I have a theory, he whispered. What is your theory, Advisor Grant? These meetings are actually a form of endurance training. For whom? For anyone still conscious at the end. Her fingers tightened slightly around his again as she quietly laughed. Across the table, a tall delegate from the Elyrian Merchant Guild stood to speak. His species had shimmering golden skin that reflected the holographic lights like polished metal. Our cargo vessels have experienced repeated delays, the merchant declared. Without additional beacon relays, navigation becomes increasingly unpredictable. Tyler nodded thoughtfully, then whispered again. I agree with him. You do? Nessa asked. Yes. Why? Because unpredictable navigation sounds like a terrible business strategy. Nessa glanced sideways at him. That is a surprisingly reasonable conclusion. Don't worry, Tyler said quietly. It won't happen again. The merchant continued speaking while a series of glowing navigation models unfolded above the council table. Tiny simulated starships traveled along projected hyperspace corridors, occasionally blinking red when they encountered unstable jump zones. Tyler watched one of the ships drift off course. See, he murmured, even the simulation wants to escape this meeting. Nessa's shoulders trembled slightly again. Tyler was beginning to suspect that Elyrian queens were not accustomed to council sessions that included running commentary. A few delegates across the chamber shifted in their seats. One or two glanced in Tyler's direction, perhaps noticing the faint whispers between the human advisor and the queen. But no one interrupted the debate. No one mentioned the fact that beneath the council table, the Queen of Elyria was still holding someone's hand. After a few minutes, Nessa spoke again. Advisor Grant. Yes, Your Majesty. Does humor always accompany human diplomacy? Tyler considered that. Not always, he said. Sometimes we use coffee. Coffee? It is a highly strategic beverage. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. In what way? It keeps diplomats awake long enough to avoid declaring war. For a moment, Nessa actually looked amused enough to forget her royal composure. Then she asked quietly, "Have you consumed coffee today?" 3 cups. That explains much. The council debate intensified again as another projection appeared, this one showing a cluster of unstable neutron stars affecting hyperspace travel. The glowing stars pulsed slowly in the air, like quiet warnings. Tyler watched them carefully. Then he spoke again in a softer voice. "You know, Your Majesty, there is something interesting about this." "What is that?" "Entire civilizations are arguing about navigation routes, trade systems, and energy networks." "Yes, but the most complicated situation in this room," Tyler added quietly, "is happening under the table." Nessa followed his gaze downward briefly. Her grip softened slightly. "You believe this is complicated?" Tyler smiled faintly. "I believe historians would be very confused." Another pause followed. The council moderator began organizing the next vote. Several delegates activated their consoles simultaneously, sending streams of data across the chamber. Tyler's wrist implant vibrated again. Agenda item 9 of 17. He leaned back slowly in his chair. "I have good news," he whispered. "What is it?" "We are now halfway through the agenda." "That is good news?" "It means survival is possible." Nessa looked toward him again. For the first time there was something warmer in her expression. Not just amusement, but comfort. Her long Elyrian ears caught the soft council lights as she turned slightly. "Advisor Grant." "Yes?" "You have remained here longer than necessary." Tyler tilted his head. "Necessary?" "You could have withdrawn your hand," she said quietly, "at any moment." He looked forward again at the glowing star maps above the table. "Yes," he said, "and yet you did not." Tyler shrugged lightly. "Well," he said softly, "if someone is clearly holding on to something, it seems unfair to pull away." For several seconds, Nessa said nothing. Then her fingers closed around his hand again. Not tightly this time, but gently. And the Queen of the Elyrian Empire returned her attention to the council debate with a calm expression that no one else in the room could possibly understand. By the time the council reached agenda item 11, Tyler had begun to suspect that Capital Sphere existed in a slightly different dimension of time, a dimension where meetings stretched indefinitely and daylight politely waited outside until the delegates finished arguing about trade routes. The artificial sky above the council dome had shifted again, changing from bright afternoon tones to a softer amber glow that suggested evening, even though no one had actually left their seats. Tyler glanced upward briefly. "Your Majesty," he whispered quietly, "I believe the planet is trying to tell us something." "What is it saying?" Nessa asked without looking away from the debate. "That we should all go home." Her fingers moved slightly around his hand again. "That would require the council to agree on something." Tyler nodded solemnly. "So we are doomed." Across the chamber, the current speaker, a tall being from the Tharvian Stellar Union, was explaining the risks of unregulated gravitational slingshot routes near black hole clusters. A massive hologram appeared in the air above the table. A swirling black hole rotated slowly, surrounded by glowing orbit paths of cargo ships. Tyler leaned forward slightly to study it. "Well," he murmured, "that looks safe." Nessa followed his gaze. "You do not think so?" "It depends," Tyler replied quietly. "Do the ships come with instructions that say, 'Try not to fall into the giant cosmic drain'?" For a moment she was silent. Then her shoulders trembled again with quiet laughter. Tyler was fairly certain that if the council ever discovered how much the Elyrian queen laughed during this meeting, several diplomatic myths would collapse instantly. The debate continued as projections of gravitational currents flowed through the chamber like rivers of light. Entire fleets of simulated cargo vessels attempted hyperspace jumps near the black hole's edge, occasionally flashing red when the models predicted catastrophic failure. Tyler pointed slightly with his chin. "See that one?" "Yes. That ship definitely fell in. It is a simulation. That is exactly what the crew probably said. Nessa glanced sideways at him. You are remarkably pessimistic. I prefer the term realistically cautious. The council moderator raised a hand for silence as several delegates attempted to speak at once. Tyler leaned back slightly in his chair. The movement caused their hands to shift again beneath the table. This time, Nessa did not tighten her grip. Instead, she simply adjusted her fingers so their hands rested more comfortably together. The change was subtle, but Tyler noticed it. He spoke more quietly now. Your Majesty. Yes? You seem calmer. Do I? Yes. Why do you think that is? Tyler shrugged lightly. Maybe the council finally reached a sensible decision. She gave him a look. That has not happened. Then I'm out of theories. For a moment she studied him. Then she said softly, when Elyrians rule, we are taught that distance preserves authority. That sounds like advice written by someone who hated hugs. Hugs. Another advanced human diplomatic technique. Nessa tilted her head slightly. I have read about those. Careful, Tyler said. They're extremely powerful. Across the chamber, the debate about gravitational navigation had escalated into a complex argument between three scientific delegations. Holographic equations filled the air like glowing constellations. Tyler stared at the numbers. I'm impressed. By the calculations? Nessa asked. No, he said. By the fact that someone voluntarily studied this. She almost laughed again. The council moderator finally announced a temporary pause while several data models were recalculated. The chamber filled with a low hum of quiet conversation. Some delegates stretched their limbs. Others checked personal consoles. Tyler glanced down briefly. Their hands were still together. He cleared his throat. You know, he said quietly, most people would probably consider this a diplomatic incident. Would they? Yes. Why? Because technically, I am holding the hand of an interstellar monarch during a policy meeting. Nessa looked thoughtful. That does sound unusual. Unusual is the polite word. And the impolite word, Tyler smiled faintly. Career ending. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, I would not allow that. Tyler blinked. That is reassuring. The Elyrian Empire honors its allies. Well, he said gently, I'm glad this counts as an alliance. Her expression changed slightly then, something thoughtful, almost vulnerable passing through her eyes. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then the council moderator called the meeting back to order. The holographic projections returned. The debate resumed. But Tyler noticed something. Nessa was no longer gripping his hand like someone holding onto a lifeline. Now she held it the way someone holds something familiar. And somehow, in the middle of a council meeting that spanned half the galaxy, that felt like the most important change of the entire day. By the time the council finally reached the last agenda item, the artificial sky above Capital Sphere had shifted into a deep violet evening. The great dome of the chamber glowed softly with distant stars projected across its surface, giving the strange impression that the meeting had lasted long enough for night to arrive naturally. Tyler suspected that might actually be true. The final debate concerned the hyperspace beacon network that had dominated most of the council session. Delegates were now voting on the proposal, sending streams of data across the chamber as their consoles flickered with confirmation signals. Tyler watched the glowing star maps above the table one last time. Tiny simulated cargo ships moved through newly approved navigation corridors, their routes now stable and efficient. For once, the galaxy appeared to agree on something, which meant the meeting was finally ending. He exhaled slowly. Beside him, Queen Nessa remained composed as always, though Tyler noticed the faint shift in her posture when the council moderator spoke. The vote has passed, the moderator announced. The beacon network will be deployed within the next standard cycle. This council session is now concluded. For a moment, the chamber filled with quiet movement. Delegates stood, consoles powered down, holographic star maps dissolved into soft, drifting light. Tyler leaned back slightly in his chair. Well, he murmured, we survived. Nessa glanced toward him. You doubted that? I doubted everything after Agenda Item 4. Her expression softened again. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Tyler became aware of something. Their hands were still joined beneath the table. The meeting had ended. The council chamber was slowly emptying, but the moment remained. Tyler looked down briefly before glancing back at her. "I believe," he said carefully, "this is the part where I return your royal property." Nessa did not immediately release his hand. Instead, she studied him quietly. Around them, the last delegates were leaving the chamber, their footsteps echoing softly across the polished floor. Finally, she spoke. "When Elyrian rulers attend council gathering," she said calmly, "every moment is observed. Every gesture carries meaning." Tyler nodded slightly. "That sounds exhausting." "It can be." Her gaze shifted briefly toward the emptying chamber. "For many years, I believed that distance protected the throne." "And now?" Tyler asked. She looked back at him. "Now I think distance can also become a prison." The words were quiet, but Tyler understood them. He had seen it earlier. The way her hand had trembled when she first held his. The way it had slowly relaxed as the hours passed. He smiled gently. "Well," he said, "if it helps, humans specialize in escaping unnecessary prisons." Nessa's lips curved again. "Yes, I have noticed." For a moment she hesitated. Then her fingers slowly loosened. Not abruptly, not reluctantly, just gently. The contact faded as their hands separated for the first time in hours. Tyler flexed his fingers slightly, half expecting them to protest after such a long diplomatic assignment. "They survived," he said thoughtfully. "What survived?" "My fingers." Nessa raised an eyebrow. "Was that in doubt?" "Your Majesty," Tyler said, standing from his chair, "this has been the most unusual council meeting of my career." "That is saying something?" "I once attended a negotiation between three species that communicated entirely through interpretive dance." She looked genuinely curious. "And which side won?" "The translators." Nessa laughed quietly. The sound echoed softly through the now empty chamber. For the first time that day, she did not seem like a distant monarch surrounded by protocol. She simply looked like someone who had been allowed to breathe again. Tyler noticed the change. Earlier, her presence had carried the weight of an empire. Now there was something lighter in her expression, something human, or at least something close to it. They walked slowly toward the exit corridor together. The towering doors of the council chamber opened as they approached, revealing the vast skyline of Capital Sphere beyond. Glowing towers, floating transit lanes, and distant stars hanging in the artificial night. Before stepping through the doorway, Nessa paused. "Advisor Grant." "Yes, Your Majesty." She studied him for a moment. "Today you showed me something important." Tyler tilted his head. "That humans have terrible meeting endurance? That kindness does not require ceremony." He blinked slightly. "Well," he said, "I mostly just sat there." "Yes," she replied softly, "and that was enough." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Tyler gave a small shrug. "Next time the council schedules an 8-hour meeting, I'll bring coffee." "Coffee? You remember," he said. "Highly strategic beverage." Her smile returned. "I would like that." They stepped out into the glowing city together, leaving the silent council chamber behind. And somewhere in the quiet space between diplomacy and friendship, something simple had changed. The Queen of the Elyrian Empire had remembered what it felt like to be human enough to hold someone's hand. And Tyler Grant had learned that sometimes the most powerful act in the galaxy was simply staying where you were needed.